go through a divorce, your world falls apart. And I just felt like, I'm never going to love again. That was my chapter on love. I guess that's closed, whatever. And changing my environment, changing what I looked at made me feel like, okay, if I can literally see something different, maybe there's the possibility of something different, not just with my sofa or not just with paint color, but with everything. It felt like hope.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. On this podcast, we talk a lot about finding joy by changing what's going on in our minds, right? We talk about mindfulness, mindset, finding gratitude, finding perspective. But today we're going to talk about our external environments. And to help us through this conversation is Rebecca West. She is a designer, a psychology coach, and the author of the book, Happy Starts at Home. She is dedicated to helping people create more joy in their lives by changing what is happening in their home and making it work for them. Today, we talk about how changing her home helped her take control of her life after a divorce. We also talk about how the things in our home that don't work for us impact our daily life and even get us to places where we're dealing with things like anger and how it's impacting our relationships. We also talk about how to decide what is and isn't working for you in your home. It was so much fun talking to Rebecca. This is a really fun conversation, so let's get to it. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited to be here.
One of the first things I want to ask you about is your title. You are a design psychology coach. Tell me what a design psychology coach is.
So, well, it's related to the work that I do, which is interior design. So the interior design is the tools of executing how our homes should look and feel and function. But the design psychology coach, part of it is, why are we making these changes? Why are we putting ourselves through the stress and hassle of a remodel? What does success really look like? Because we can make something look pretty, but if it's not actually supporting the goals we've set for ourselves in our life, then all it is pretty. And that's only one layer of something that can go a lot deeper when it comes to our homes.
I know so many people who have tried to copy the Pinterest thing, even though it's not what they feel inside, but it's a trend. So they want to go on trend. Before we get to that and why that doesn't work, tell me about your aha moment. Like, when did you realize that the way your home was set up was impacting you and your life?
Well, I wasn't an interior designer at the time. I had previously had a career teaching ballroom dance, and I had been married, and I found that my marriage wasn't working. So I had stopped that career and tried to work on the marriage. Marriage didn't work out. And so when he moved out, I got to keep the house, which was a blessing, but he didn't take all the memories with him. So I was in this space that was evoking all these memories of this past relationship and also the failure of this relationship. And I always like to say, like, walking past the sofa was like having a piece of furniture whisper to you, like, you make bad life decisions and you suck. And I was just, one day I woke up and I went, I cannot keep living like this. I can't be surrounded by my past and so feeling so trapped by it. And I started making dramatic changes, like painting my ceiling black, which was a horrible design decision. But it was a great life decision because it broke the space free of that previous story. And it gave me permission to be really intentional about what I was going to create in the space. And then I did that. And it was wonderful, not just beautiful, but also wonderful because it was about my future. And that was my aha moment, because I went, oh, this thing that I've always had a loose talent for, color and setting up rooms and stuff, but I never took seriously as a career because I'm like, interior design's for rich people who have too many houses, whatever. And then in that moment I went, no, used well, this could help people because it just helped me.
Wow. Tell me about, the next morning you change the couch, you get that new couch in there. Tell me the next morning you wake up, what are those feelings that you felt as you walked into that room?
Well, for me, it's hope. It's, I think I can say that at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, when you go through a divorce, your world falls apart. And I just felt like, I'm never going to love again. That was my chapter on love. I guess that's closed, whatever. And I didn't think my life was over, but I definitely felt like that aspect of my life was closed, which is, looking back, it's silly, but that's how you feel. It's so dark. It's so hard. And changing my environment, changing what I looked at made me feel like, okay, if I can literally see something different, maybe there's the possibility of something different, not just with my sofa or not just with paint color, but with everything. It felt like hope.
Wow. It's so amazing. So you talk about how we have all kinds of rules and things that have been set up in places like hospitals. We know if a hospital looks a certain way that people are more likely to recover quickly. Yet
Mm-hmm.
then we don't bring those same elements of design and understanding into our own homes, which is where we spend a lot more time.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that. Walk me through that comparison and why that matters.
Oh, well, it matters because our spaces affect us, whether we are aware of it or not. Like I always say, our homes are not neutral. They are either supporting what we're trying to achieve in our lives, or they are setting up obstacles to what we're trying to achieve in our lives. And so, commercial design, people think a lot harder about this stuff because there's a lot of money there. And, hospitals, if they can heal people faster, there's actually money to be made there. And we know that in this world, money is the thing that makes decisions. So when it comes to personal realms, homes, the money is made in just selling us stuff, right? It's not made in helping us heal faster or helping us treat ourselves better or our other family members better. It's made in literally selling us stuff. So the interior design, when it comes to residential living, is just focused on, buy another sofa. But so, it doesn't mean that we can't apply the same principles of thinking, okay, well, how can my home help me heal from this tragedy? Or how can my home make it easier for me to get in shape or communicate better with my spouse or create quiet zones for my children when they need to study or focus? All the same things can apply. We just have to take a lot more responsibility for it because the money making machines aren't going to do it for us.
Mm-hmm. And as you said that, I was thinking those money-making machines are cluttering my house right now, and that's not working for me.
Yeah, I mean, stuff will flow into our homes, but we have to very intentionally make it flow back out. It doesn't do it on its own.
Mm-hmm. So someone listening, how do they get started on this? How do they start taking that inventory of what is working for them in their house and what's not?
Yeah, well, there is in my book, there are exercises and you can adapt them. So like one of the exercises would just be walking through your home and trying to identify things that either give you a feeling of joy, the whole Marie Kondo was sparking joy, or the negative feelings of, oh, every time I look at that, I remember that relationship, or the only reason I'm holding on to that is because my aunt gave it to me and I feel guilty if I let go of it. So walking through your home and instead of just going, it's pretty or it isn't, going, when I look at that thing, how does it make me feel? And then also thinking about what do I want for my life? An easy one is the New Year's resolution around getting fit, right? Take a look at your entry space. If you're trying to leave the house every day for a run, is it easy to find the shoes that you need, the jacket that you need for the weather? Or is your entry closet so crammed full that it's really hard for you to get the gear you need, which means it's an obstacle? So thinking about your home from the perspective of what have I said I want to do with my life? And what in any room, what's happening in this room to support or get in the way of that goal?
Very cool and very easy. So if you've gone
Mhm.
through, let's go to the first one you mentioned. If you've gone through your house and you're like, okay, this is not bringing me joy. This is not sparking joy.
Right.
What do you do next? How do you know what the solutions are for that space?
Well, I start small, first of all. Like literally, anybody who's done a good purge knows how good it feels to let go of things that aren't feeling good, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we start thinking about our houses when we get overwhelmed because we're thinking about all the rooms at once. We're thinking about the big projects. And that can be really paralyzing. So instead, start as small as you possibly can. And that can be something like actually changing out a burnt out light bulb or
Wow.
repairing the lock on your door. Those are two examples. The light bulbs was one of my clients. The lock on my door was me. I spent a year of my life with a lock that made me angry until, one moment I walked home and I was like, What am I waiting for? 20 minutes and a screwdriver, I can fix this thing. So think as small as you can, because that builds momentum. It'll lead to the next thing and to the next thing. And before you know it, the things that seemed paralyzing before will be comfortable because you've worked your way up to them.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up that story about the lock. I love that story. So tell me about what that showed and what that was doing in your life on a daily basis. Cause you have to put your key in your lock every single day,
Yeah.
maybe several times a day. What was
Yep.
that doing to your life and your state of mind?
Yeah, okay, so this is the lock to my front door, and it was just one of those where, you have to put all your stuff down because you need your left hand to lift the door just a little, and then you got to put the key in just the right amount, and then you can open the door. So every single day I'd come home. My husband frequently gets home ahead of me. I am now remarried. And he gets home ahead of me, and he's from Jersey, so he locks the door. It's what you do. And I would be so annoyed because I'm like, he should have psychically felt that I was coming home and unlocked the door. And so there was this, not only was I frustrated with having to put my bags down and get my keys out, but I was also like, why didn't my husband think ahead and take care of me? And I was putting all of this around this one moment that was happening at least once a day, as you say. And because my husband's a contractor, I was deferring the responsibility to fixing it to him. So there's the psychology of not taking responsibility for my own ability to accomplish something because I know how to use a screwdriver. There is the psychology of blaming my husband for not leaving this door unlocked and why can't he anticipate my needs better, all wrapped up in the physical moment of my key doesn't work in this door. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. And so by saying one day, this is dumb, I'm going to fix this, it took all of that away. It made it shined a light on the fact that all of that was dumb and that this lock has nothing to do with my marriage. My husband is not mistreating me by not fixing this lock. And I do have the wherewithal as a strong, independent woman to go fix it my dang self, which reminds me of my power in general. Instead of giving it away, I'm holding on to it.
It's amazing that just such a small thing can bring all that angst and anger and thought process, which is after you fix it, which is probably a quick trip, not very expensive. You get
Exactly.
it switched, and then it doesn't really evoke strong feelings anymore, right? Like maybe the first time or the second time you open it, but then you're kind of past it, or?
Well, I was thinking about that the other day, and because it was almost a full year of being so mad at this lock, because I waited so long to do it, it's actually been a really lingering joy for me. Every time the door opens easily, I actually get the opposite response. So I'm not telling people that they should hold on to something that's not working for them for a super long time, but there is a silver lining to it.
That is so funny. Okay. So we start there. We start with the small stuff. And then what was the second step? What works for you? So how does a person start thinking about, okay, what do I want my space to do, and how to evolve a space into supporting that? You gave the exercise example. Any other examples?
Well, you have to kind of hear the voice in your head and try and identify where it's coming from. So if you're feeling like you should remodel or you should paint or you should buy or get rid of something, you've really got to examine where the should is coming from, because frequently it's coming from the Pinterest boards you've been looking at or from what your sister says she would do if she lived in your home. But in fact, she doesn't. This is your home, right? So anytime we're thinking of making a change, we need to figure out if there's a should in that change and identify where it's coming from. Bring it back to, like, if you're thinking, I need to make some changes in my living room, think about, okay, what my favorite question I ask when we do an initial intake before we do a big remodel project design for our clients is, what would success look like? Because I really need to know, after all the dust is settled, how do we know that the money and energy was spent well? So when you're thinking about your own projects, whatever room it is, go, when it's all said and done, how will I know it was a success? And that really helps you create a target and something to pay attention to while you're making your decisions. And it can help you filter out things too, because projects can snowball really easily. And you're like, oh, well, while I'm changing this, I guess I'll change this and this and this and this too. And if you know what success looks like, it can go, yeah, I could change those 5 other things, but they're not actually related to what I need from the room, and I can also just leave them alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you've ever had any clients who have been like, I need a solution for the toys that are always making their way to the living room.
Oh yeah, that's a
Okay, I need
regular
I
thing.
need the answer. Because as I was taking I think it was like the assessment online, and I'm like,
Mhm.
not happy, not happy, toys, 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 toys. So
Well, and that's a huge one, right? So you've got several levels that you can think about it from. So the first one is just literal functionality. Do the toys have a good home in your house in the first place? Because especially if you want your kids involved in putting them away, it's got to be storage systems that make it possible for a young person to put them away, right? I think about that with shoe cubbies a lot. You got these perfect little shoe cubbies, but who's going to take the time to put their shoes in this perfect little shoe cubby?
mm-hmm.
You know, so the functionality of who's putting it away, and is that system going to work for the person who's meant to put it away? Number two, where the activity happens versus where the things are stored. What's the alignment with those two things? And if all the activity always happens in the living room, but all the storage is in a different room, again, we're talking obstacles, right? So that just got harder than it had to be. So maybe there needs to be some big laundry baskets or something where all the toys can just be dumped, and then the whole laundry basket can be picked up and put back in the room where the storage is.
Mm.
So things like that. Then it's also a matter of the culture of the house, right? So this happens a lot when you have spouses. One person's a piler and really needs to see their stuff, and the other person says, clutter will make me go homicidal.
Yeah.
Right. And so you have to be able to go, what are the needs that are being met by the piles? What are the needs that are being met by the non-clutter? And how can we make sure both of those needs are met? And so with kids, they're going to be the same way. Some of them are out personalities. They'll leave the things out. And some of them are tidy personalities. And we've got to work with the habits of real life, identifying what our actual habits and our actual needs are, and then going, okay, now how can I build a solution around that? Because the wished for solution might take so much energy, and you'll always be battling it. And then you're just setting yourself up for failure over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. I love those thoughtful ways of thinking about the obstacles and what is manageable for a little person.
Mm-hmm.
I once had a babysitter tell me that basically their philosophy in their house was if it was flat, it would have stuff on top of it. So like the island and the bar and
Oh
the coffee
yeah.
table and the fireplace, whatever was flat, there would be stuff on it. I don't know if that comes up a lot, but what are the solutions that people can start thinking about those kinds of issues?
Yeah, and it depends on how far the piles have gotten, right? Because going back to the idea of being overwhelmed or paralyzed, it depends on how far we've gotten down this rabbit hole. And then if we're so far that it's overwhelmed and paralyzed, you got to go back to that. What's one small step? What's one small thing we can do?
Mm.
But if you haven't gotten to the paralyzed point and you're still in the, okay, this is manageable, but I'm tired of constantly fighting the same battles, then it goes back to, okay, which room can have piles? At the end of the day, what do we need to have as family habits to put the piles away so that they aren't always there? Do we need baskets that can, again, we can dump and go
Mhm.
at the end so that our dinner table is clear of clutter? And so much of it is about family habits. In my growing up home, there was no clutter. There were no toys out because I grew up Swiss military and Baptist, and they had a rule. They said the first time your toy is left out, it's going to go in jail. It was the top shelf of a hall closet for a day. And the second time that toy is left out, it's going to go in jail for a week. And the third time, it's going to be given away to somebody who will appreciate having it. And it was given to charity. I'll tell you
Wow.
what, we learned real fast about putting our toys away because my parents set the rules and they had really good follow through around it.
Mhm.
Now, that's not necessarily a battle every parent wants to take on, but we are, whether we're entrepreneurs and we're training our clients to behave a certain way, and maybe that client is texting us at midnight every single day. Well, if we're answering back, well, we're reinforcing that habit. We do the same thing by feeding our pets at the table. Like they're like, yes, this is where food happens. And you're creating that habit. So we have to be aware of our own habits and what we're rewarding in ourselves, our children, our pets, our clients, because we have more control than we like to employ, but it does take follow through and it does take discipline.
Yeah. And I imagine that that spills over to every single room, every single habit, every issue that you're dealing with.
Yep.
When you got your divorce, I imagine that going through a divorce, things feel really out of control.
Hmm.
Taking control of your room and changing that, tell me about what that did in terms of feeling like you had some control in your life.
Yes, I love cleaning because that's exactly what it does. When my world is really, really upside down, I can be like, well, at least I can vacuum, right? At least I can get the crumbs off the floor. And it just lets me feel like I have this tiny, tiny bit of control. It calms my nervous system down and allows me to go, all right, what's the next thing? What's the next most important thing? And it's, something that's going to actually be related to my life. So I know it doesn't happen for everybody, but a lot of people identify with if there is physical chaos around them, visual chaos around them, and also auditory chaos, all that too much TV, too much radio, too many people screaming in the house, too many dogs barking, that if other things are already out of control in your life, that just elevates it, it tips it over. And so if you can get to a quiet room, if you can close the door, if you can vacuum or dust or just clear the papers off your table, everything suddenly feels just a little bit more manageable, and you can take the next step, whatever that next step is.
hmm When you're working with clients, what is something that comes up most often in terms of holding someone back from feeling happiness in their home?
It's usually the shoulds. It's usually these rules that they seem to think are real that aren't, because
They're
there are no
shitting on
real rules.
themselves.
They're shitting on themselves. That sounds terrible.
I know. It's supposed to sound like what it sounds like,
That's
but it's
awesome.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because most of us, so much of my job is just giving people permission to do what they already knew they needed.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, we all have trouble giving ourselves permission to do the thing we need. And there's lots of reasons for that. But people know the colors they love, and so my job is to say, yes, paint your kitchen turquoise, why the heck not, or they know that they don't want to sleep in the master bedroom, they want to use the guest room and make the master their office, and they're like, yeah, but it's the master and it's got the ensuite bath. I'm like, there are no design police. There really, really, really aren't. Use your home the way you need it to be used.
That is so, so cool that you're able to help people get past that. Cause I would have never thought that it was acceptable to consider the master bedroom as anything other than a master bedroom.
Right.
So what are the steps to getting over the shoulds? How do you get over the shoulds?
Well, first, honestly, the biggest step is just becoming aware of them.
Hmm.
So much of solving any problem is really identifying and defining the problem. So much of this is unconscious. We aren't aware of the rules that we grew up with as children around what is home supposed to look like, who's in charge of actually setting up our home. There's somebody I just interviewed recently for my podcast, and she was talking about how she's really bad at setting up a home, but she thought that that was her job. And so she spent the last 5, 6 years in a space that wasn't working for her or her family. And then they finally moved. And in the process of moving, she decided to be a lot more intentional about it. And part of that is that she's letting her partner take the lead on making a lot of these home setup choices, because he's good at it and enjoys it, and she's not and doesn't. And now the whole thing is just working better.
Wow.
Right. So we have to just become aware of that. And that is through all the things that we do, right? Meditation and reading the right kind of self-help books and sitting and thinking about the problem differently for a minute.
Or is there any question that you pose to people that helps them uncover their shoulds?
Well, when we're working together, it's I behave like a 5-year-old toddler going, why? They'll say, because what happens a lot of times is people will go, Rebecca, should I put a lamp in this corner? And I'm like, maybe, because the real question has to be, what do you need to use the corner for? What do you need to use your home for? And that makes the client pause and go, oh, well, actually, I don't have a spot for yoga. I'm like, oh, well, then maybe we shouldn't put a lamp in the corner. Maybe we should clear it out so you can do yoga there in the mornings.
Hmm.
So if you ask, whenever you're thinking, should I paint this wall this color? Ask yourself, why? What is the desired outcome? Just stop anytime you're making a decision and go, why? what is this supposed to accomplish? And that should help uncover some of those shoulds. Like, who's really telling me that I should get rid of this thing I love? Or who's really telling me that I should hold on to this thing I don't like? That's where those shoulds are hiding.
Who's really telling me that I need shiplap in every one of my rooms?
Right? Yeah.
I've been thinking about the shiplap because I am so obsessed with it right now, but I think it's a true love. It's okay. I think it's a true love.
I'm so glad you said that, because you were talking about trends, and in psychology, part of design psychology is that people like to belong. Trends are a real thing because as humans, we want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like we're part of the in group, that we're accepted by other people. And so by following trends, sometimes that's a very easy way for us to identify with our tribe. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong with following a trend is if you, for example, hated shiplap, but you're like, I guess I should put it in. Well, that's dumb. But if you love it, it doesn't matter if everybody's doing it. If you love it, do it too.
The only thing, so this I think probably brings up another good thing that people think about. The thing that's been holding me back from the shiplap in my main house is my resell. Like, when I resell it, is everyone going to be happy about the shiplap? How often does that come up?
Yeah.
I need to protect the resale value of my home.
It happens all the time. And it should be part of your thought process, because especially in the United States, our homes is a really important part of our wealth and how we pass on wealth and accumulate wealth. So it's important to think about it, but it's also important to think about it in terms of time. Now, we don't know the future. We don't know when we're going to move out of a house, but we have a sense of it. That we might be moving in a year or 10 years or 20 years. So if the timeline is 10 to 20 years, just don't even worry about it, because the world could be, like an asteroid could hit us and there could be no Earth by then. Like, do what you need, because 10 and 20 years is a long time, and your home should be supporting you in that period. If it's a year or two, yeah, resale should definitely be top of mind. And then maybe instead of doing an entire room full of shiplap, you do an accent wall and you install it in a way that's easier to take down, or you really focus on the furniture and getting that beachy vibe from the furniture instead of the wall treatments, because there's lots of ways to change your home that doesn't have to be as permanent as tile or wall treatments or countertops, things like that. But the thing is, time goes by so quickly. This comes up a lot too with renters. They're like, well, I'm just renting. But people will rent the same place for 3 and 5 and 10 years. And that's a long time to hate the wall color, or to not have window treatments that are blocking the light the way you need them to, or the sound from the street the way you need them to. And if you're going to live there for 10 years, I guarantee the landlord will repaint it anyway. So you can either, ask permission or not and plan to repaint it back to neutral yourself, or not and just say that your deposit is part of the cost of doing business, because after 10 years, that deposit was pretty well spread out over that amount of time, right? So just the idea of, again, check your rules, check the assumptions you're working under. It doesn't mean you should paint your walls, because we don't work on shoulds, right? It just means that you can. And so much of this sometimes is realizing what we can do. Sometimes just knowing we can do something makes us feel like we have power, and we don't even have to do it. Just knowing that we can makes it a little bit more in our control, and then we can choose not to.
I love that. I can't believe our time has gone so quickly. The last question I want to ask you is what I ask all of my guests. This podcast is all about finding more joy in the everyday. So I want to ask you your number one tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in-between.
I love that question. And I like to say that there's one change that you can make right now that will make your home a happier place. And that is having gratitude for what we have. It's really easy to focus on the projects that are undone and the changes we'd like to make. But to remember that we have a roof over our head and a door that locks and plumbing that works and lets us have a hot shower every single day, that is the height of luxury. And if we count our blessings instead of the to-do list, we will instantly be happier at home.
I love that. I love that, especially because we're talking about making changes and doing things different and upgrading our spaces. But to be able to keep in mind that we are already so abundantly blessed, I think that's incredible. Even with that lock, if you're not in a place where you can change the lock, you still get to lock the door. So
exactly.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. You know, one of the things I wanted to get to, but we ran out of time, was how to do some of this inexpensively. And she has a website you can check out, lots of different ideas on how to take control of your space without spending a whole bunch of money. That and a whole lot more. And of course, I'll link that. I will link her book as well, Happy Starts at Home. And I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.